Hola a todos. Welcome to our next week where we're going to do chapter 6, 7, and 8. I'm working on your cases right now, so I'm going to do like one video at a time. So this is chapter 6. Tomorrow I'm hopefully going to do 7 and 8. But I've at least figured I'd give you something for the meantime. Chapter 6 is a very important chapter. If you want to talk about one of the top 3 topics of all topics when we're looking at things from a sales management perspective, salesperson performance is one of those topics. And what this chapter does is it really rolls into some of the most key deciding factors into performance. Now, when we look at the model, I apologize for this model. Messy, it's complicated. There's too many arrows going in too many directions. But basically, when we think about performance, we measure performance, or we look at performance under these 5 basic factors: role perceptions, aptitude, skill level, motivation, and there's some personal and organizational and environmental variables, right? I've been meaning to talk to Greg, why he sets this up in the book this way, but to me, it almost seems like in the book, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to point this out here. When we talk about role inaccuracy, we define it in terms of conflict and ambiguity. Look at how it's defined. The degree to which a person's perceptions of role partners' demands are accurate or not. Well, to me, Christmas. Undo, drag, and drop. Role accuracy, conflict, and ambiguity aren't 3 separate things. Role accuracy is defined as either conflict or ambiguity. Conflict is when things are defined so tightly and there's one or more role partners that are butting heads or overlapping. Role ambiguity is when the roles are not defined well at all. There's too much gray area and the salesperson doesn't know what he or she should be doing. So conflict, ambiguity. Those 2 are role inaccuracy. I want to make sure that you got those straight. Aptitude, we do have some aptitude. There are studies that fall into this, okay? But before we get too much into aptitude, I want to make another point very clear. That in my eyes, anyone can sell. Now, granted, this is the new school selling. Old school, I would say it's easier to argue that salespeople are born, not made. New school selling, salespeople are made, not born. Some people do have some of these aptitude characteristics, but really, these are helpful, but I think learning some of these personalities, it helps that you have some of this need for achievement, power, creativity, flexibility. But in a new school environment, I think it's less salespeople are born and much more salespeople are made. We can learn these skills. We can be trained on these skills. Some other things I wanted to hit at before we hit the questions. Oh, this did not come up at all in the questions, so this is something I wanted to stress. In very much in an ethics or a corporate social responsibility worldview, salespeople, good salespeople, should have a high OCB, we call it OCB, behavior. And we can measure this. There's scales. Sportsmanship, teammanship, being a team player, and these are all framed within terms of the corporation. Altruistic, conscientiousness, team in sports, civic virtue. This is all these questions. You are a good citizen of the firm. You're not out there being a lone wolf, doing things on your own, not caring about the company. You're out there and you are a true representative of the company. OCB. Very good one. Something else that I don't think we've talked about so far this semester. I have to be pretty clear that the textbook and the majority of the literature that supports this textbook are North American centric. Or I think a better way to say that is individualistic culture centric. So there's individualism and collectivism. You know, the United States, Australia, and England tend to be the highest individualistic cultures. There are many cultures around the world that are more collectivist. Obviously, one is not better than the other. It's culture. So just so you know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about this semester is skewed towards individualistic type firms, cultures, countries. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't apply some of this towards collectivist societies. And to be honest with you, the move towards new school selling and relationships is a move towards more collectivistic culture. Okay? There's a number of questions that we're going to get to about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. But there are two buckets, and extrinsic certainly outweigh intrinsic by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll get to that. Satisfaction, self-explanatory, role perceptions. I think that's all I wanted to highlight specifically here on the slide. So let me get to your questions for Chapter 6. Ready? What is the best way for a salesperson to resolve ambiguity issues? And then we have them here in conflict issues. You know, the reason why we have conflict and ambiguity issues with salespeople is they are boundary spanners, meaning they're both inside the firm and outside the firm. They're the representative outside the firm. Chances are they don't have a desk at corporate headquarters. They have a home office and they're out on their own. They may or may not get to talk to their sales manager on a daily or a weekly basis. So because of that, things arise out in the field that, oh, look, there's no policy here. This is a gray area. This is greenfield. What do I do? You know, I think the easiest way to talk about this is there are firms that have very, very strict rules that you will go there and your training really is an HR sales manager. These are the 544 rules for you to be a salesperson at firm X. You know, and those are the rules. You do not deviate from the rules because there are consequences. There's a lot of companies out there that are like that. They are very rule-oriented. There are a lot of other companies out there that have more, instead of rules, they have missions or behaviors where they let the salesperson be entrepreneurial, and given these sets of ethics and values within the firm, you decide how you should behave, you know, with conflict and ambiguity. In those situations, the salesperson has to have the initiative to solve a problem without there being much guidance from the sales manager. This is happening more and more with new school selling, because with new school selling, we want our salespeople to be entrepreneurial. We want them to do what's best for the customer, even if there isn't a rule for it. Now, I still haven't answered your question here, but I'm heading in that direction. You know, the best, if you do not have a good relationship with your sales manager, we just saw this case, we're going to see another case, there's problems. You know, if there is not a two-way dialogue between you and your manager, if there is not a wiki or some kind of a feedback loop electronically that you can send to your sales manager and your senior VP of sales to help work out some of these gray areas, whether they're conflict being overdefined or ambiguity, it's not a real word, or there's ambiguity, no defined. You know, you guys have to have the dialogue. You know, the manager, the senior VP of sales, and the salesperson. If there isn't a good two-way feedback, there isn't a way for the salesperson to talk to the sales manager, you know, hopefully there are protocols and exercises. Hopefully this isn't something that you have to wait until your quarterly sales meeting with your sales manager to work all this stuff out. You know, a lot of firms out there use wikis, because not only can the sales manager see it, other salespeople can look at it and say, oh, I see your pain point over here. This is what I do in that situation. Is there much of a difference between roles and responsibilities of the average salesperson compared to the industrial salesperson, other than what they are selling? Well, whether we talk about the average salesperson and the industrial salesperson, we really have to talk about the magnitude of the sale. You know, hypothetically speaking, I have students right now working for ADP. They're selling various service packages and various contracts, and I don't know, they're a couple grand, 10 grand, they could get up to 20 grand, you know. I have former students that are working for consulting firms, not McKinsey, but McKinsey-like, that they have, you know, 7-figure contracts. I have former Dr. Dano students that are working for industrial suppliers that they sell, you know, in multiple 7-digit contracts. You know, I think the better way to look at this is the magnitude of the sale. The higher the magnitude, meaning the price tag and or the contract, the more there is a difference in roles and responsibilities of the salesperson. You know, it is some of what they're selling, but I think the easier way to look at it is how expensive is the sale? How long is that sales cycle? You know, if it takes you 3 years to cut a deal, but then that's a 10-year deal, okay. And that's radically different than someone who has a contract and they're looking for someone to close $5, $6, $8, $20,000 contracts in a given quarter. What are some of the common forms of sales technology implemented within businesses other than forms that enable them to go to work to go? Well, instead of the common forms in sales technology, most firms have some kind of a centralized CRM database. There used to be a lot of bad ones out there, but we're getting into an environment where we can have a very powerful CRM solution that is plug and play, meaning it's standard templates in an Excel or PowerPoint mentality. It's very easy to add a new field into the database. If I were to pick one, you know, Salesforce is really the leading firm out there. There are many competitors to Salesforce, but Salesforce has a brilliant mobile solution that merges with their desktop solution, and it's very easy for both the salesperson, the sales manager, anyone within a sales team, or the operations side of the equation. Get all these crazy emails all the time. To see what's going on, where we are in the sales cycle, when can something be shipped, lots of details about this particular client if someone's calling them on the first time that are in the database. If you get a chance, go to YouTube and look up Salesforce. And there's a number of, they have a number of 3 to 5 minute videos that could really be helpful. How big of a problem is perceived role ambiguity in today's business world? It's huge. Sorry to be vague like that, but I think conflict is more common than ambiguity, because people tend to stay within a role and then they have issues with the role or the job changing, and then there's conflict. Role ambiguity happens more with new sales roles. Not new person to the sales role, but like a new division or a new product or a new customer group. That's when there's more ambiguity. Usually there's conflict is something bigger than ambiguity, or more common than ambiguity. Can role ambiguity happen outside of sales? Oh, yeah. Can role ambiguity happen within a classroom where the professor is not clear enough vis-a-vis the syllabus on what to do? Yes. Is it known if extrinsic or intrinsic rewards have a better impact on performance? All right. Let's talk about this. Extrinsic is way more common than intrinsic. Extrinsic are rewards that are measurable, meaning money or a trip or a parking spot. You know, they are something that are measurable. They are a thing. They are a quantity. Intrinsic rewards are feelings of self-worth. Intrinsic rewards is you're the employee of the month. You're the MVP. And none of these have any kind of intrinsic bonus or vacation pay or anything tied to them. Intrinsic rewards are a pat on the back. They're a high five. They're a feeling of self-worth. They're a satisfaction that you have. It's not surprising that, you know, especially in a shift, you know, there was no such thing as intrinsic rewards in old school. We just started getting these. Extrinsic rewards, you know, bonus pay, commission, you know, sales managers have been dealing with this for decades, if not longer. Now, let me see if I can be even more helpful here. Daniel Pink, very good author. He's not a sales guy. He's actually an attorney by training. And he was on, when Al Gore was the vice president, he was Al Gore's speechwriter. And when Al Gore was running for president, he was very involved with his campaign. That saying, he's not, none of these books are about politics. I'm just giving you a little background about him. This is his most recent book, To Sell is Human. And this is probably one of the most recent books that makes the case for new school selling. It's a pretty good book. I mean, given all the philosophy that we've been talking about this semester with new school selling, the premise should not surprise you, but the details, this is very good. There's a question coming up about how do you talk to someone who's never sold before. This is usually the direction where I start them at. Now, related to our question here, Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us. This is a spectacular book. This book predated this book. And he talks about salespeople and non-salespeople in this book. And really, a lot of the recent data shows that money alone cannot motivate us. Bonuses and commission alone cannot motivate us. I think the story is even a little more richer than he has in this book. But this book is still very good. And we're going to get to that in a couple questions. Two very, very good books. I've read them both. Where's Drive? I don't know. Oh, there it is. This is To Sell is Human. And where's Drive? Drive is somewhere here. I don't know. I have a lot of books in my office. Okay. In your opinion, what is the best way for, as a manager, to approach a salesperson who's clearly not satisfied in their job? Now, it is your job as the manager to have your finger on the pulse of your employees. You know, there is a reason why they're not satisfied with their job. In many cases, it has nothing to do with the company, the job, their clients, and it's all external. It's all external. You know, And as a sales manager, you need to be dialoguing with your salesperson. You need to be having these conversations to figure out what's going on. Can you help him or her in some way, shape, or form? Can you do that or not? Is there something, if it is internal to the firm, i.e., in the case we had bad sales managers, right? We had people that needed to be removed, correct? Is there a way around this? Because it could be the case that if someone's not satisfied with their job, you could lose a very, very good employee. Now, in a related question, how do you hold a sales team accountable for the results if there's factors beyond their control that are influencing their performance? Very much in the spirit of this, the sales manager has their finger on the pulse of what's going on. They have a one-on-one dialogue with not only the team leader or the salesperson, but all the other members of the team. They figure out what's going on and what's the problem. Is it avoidable, not avoidable, and how do we go forward? Now, if someone's not satisfied with their job, or there are factors beyond their control, and you're the sales manager, and you see it from their perspective, and you kind of agree with it, then okay. It's part of their quarterly, semi-annually, or annually report. Now, that said, in a B2B firm, and I'm not old school, and I'm not Theory X, but at some point you have to make a decision, if these salespeople are 100% of our revenue, and we have someone that's clearly not satisfied, or we have a team and there are factors beyond their control, and quarter after quarter or year after year they keep saying the factors are beyond their control, maybe it's time for some fresh blood to come in. When do you make that decision? How long do you wait? Some firms don't wait at all. They won't even give you a year. You figure it out or they move on. In a new school selling environment, you're going to get more than 1 or 2 reporting cycles, whatever they may be, but you're not going to get 5. You're not going to get 6. This is the only way the firm generates revenue, is salespeople. It's tough. It's really tough. There's no short, quick answer there. Generally speaking, if you were a sales manager to hire a new person to your sales force with little to no experience, what are some of the steps you would take to train them initially? What would be some of the advice and guidance you would provide? Well, I'm hopeful this is a new school selling environment, and new school selling environments always have a strong training program. And training is not only how to do the steps in the sales process, but training is also orientating them towards a new school selling mentality. There are a lot of firms out there that will not hire previous salespeople because they don't want to bring any historical baggage into their new firm and have to untrain someone to train someone new towards how the new worldview. Let me say that another way. There are firms out there that if you worked in sales at some other firm and you worked in sales for too long or something along those, they won't hire you because they think that you might have too much sales baggage coming into the new firm and you can't think the way the new firm wants you to think. So in that case, they will only hire people with minimal experience. And they'll be looking for other things like organizational citizenship behaviors, ethics, drive, personality. You don't necessarily have to be an extroverted individual, but you have to be able to listen really, really well. You have to be empathetic. Could be the case that a firm will only hire someone who's high in emotional intelligence. And then from there, they'll train them how to be a salesperson. How would you recommend a new salesperson with minimal experience for a role on their own? Meaning they have minimal sales experience, prepare on a role. You gotta find a mentoring relationship. See if you can go into your LinkedIn accounts and find some other people that are working in sales and start having some conversations. We're going to pick up the Daniel Pink book. Because the sales profession is so robust out there, there are a lot of somewhat decent programs. He's not alive anymore, but Zig Ziglar sessions I went to when I was young and I was a salesperson. You know, there's things that you can do. Are there ways to avoid role perceptions ambiguity? I think we hammered this pretty good. In some, it's a dialogue. If there's no dialogue, then there's even a bigger problem than the ambiguity or the conflict. As mentioned in the text, the effect of global sales responsibilities on an individual sales performance. The effect? Would it be better for companies to expand global sales force or to have a more top-down to the local sales force to increase sales at a global level? I am a bigger fan of having local sales force. If you can do it, either an internal local sales force, meaning their actual employees, or in the majority of the cases, if we talked about rep firms in our last video, the local sales force is a rep firm in another country. They're an external sales force, but at least they're local to that particular country. Because what happens is then you avoid some of the international faux pas. If you have the same culture selling to the same culture, you know, there's less of a translation issue. Both language, both culture, financially, logistics, all of it. One of the problems with individualistic cultures when they go to sell around the world is we are very direct. You know, there is high context cultures and low context cultures. The low context cultures are direct. They're informal. You know, a US or a UK or an Australian salesperson could go to a meeting for the first time and ask for the sale. And that's not uncommon. That's a low context culture. High context cultures, ooh, no. This is long-term relationships. You might need to know someone for a year before you can even ask for business. You know, they're much richer. They're less to the point. You know, and a perfect example, in Japan, a salesperson could be having a sales presentation, and someone from Japan could say yes. And yes means not yes, I will buy. Yes means, yes, I understand you and I am in favor of your brand or business, but I may or may not be willing to buy at the moment. So, low context, yes means I will buy. High context, yes means I may or may not be buying. In the next 20 years, what do you think the greatest change would be in a salesperson's role? I still don't think salespeople are using technology enough. I still think salespeople are doing it out on their own. I think that the documentation of the sales steps is still not automated enough. But if I were to say the single greatest is, and this is right in my wheelhouse, this is what I care about, this is what your final reflection paper is going to be more like, is how is social and digital changing the sales force? I mean, it's so easy for me to think of, you know, back in the day when I had to find leads, it was really hard to do. Finding leads now is not hard anymore. It really isn't. It really isn't. And now, how do you develop the relationships using social and digital with those leads? All right, very good. Chapter 6. I'm going to get other chapters going, and I'm going to keep grading our cases. Thanks.